The stories I'm bringing in today are from times where I was training to become an EMT or training to be a paramedic. When I was an EMT and training to be an EMT, we were speaking a lot about head-on collisions, very specifically, which is odd head-on collisions, cars versus houses, or cars versus weird vehicles. And the very day that happened, I ended up responding to was off duty. I was off duty, and my father and I are driving along a street, and we see what seems to be a weird box in the middle of the road. And when we got closer, we realized it was a car. At the time of this story, I was 18 years old. I was in high school and taking an EMT class. This car hit a plow head on that had moved out of the way. And there was a nurse helping them out and a couple of other random people and about 20 people on the side of the road freaking out. The driver was having difficulty breathing from chest trauma, and the passenger was altered. He was not understanding what was going on, and everyone started to look to me to tell them what to do, because none of them had any training in car accidents or how to deal with it. And I'm brand spanking new. I hadn't even graduated my course yet. So I start to do a head-to-toe assessment of both of them, and gathering the chest trauma, and the other guy's altered, and they have very life-threatening injuries. The people who were helping out were significantly older than me, 40s, 50s, and I was 18 telling them what to do, and this felt weird. And trying to adjust to being in charge of a scene that I barely knew what to do with. This was in the day before cell phones too, so someone had to go running to go call 911. So we didn't know how long we were going to be there. So I had to make sure that these guys weren't freezing to death. Meanwhile, I'm freezing to death. So I didn't have my jacket on. My car, we had to make sure the car was off so the heat couldn't be running. And the crowd started yelling that the car was on fire. And I became frozen in fear, and whether or not the car was actually on fire or not. And it took me a moment to kind of get over this moment and back up and recognize a car was smoking, but that was not from a fire. It's the usual smoking from a car that comes from an accident. The cars are not meant to explode like the movies. And I took a deep breath and had to calm the whole situation down. And finally, it was a 10-minute, 20 minutes, seemed like 20 minutes. Could have been less. When you're in the moment, time seems longer than it is. And I was actually scared. So, being in charge, and when I was able to calm down enough to communicate to the other EMTs and medics what was going on and get these guys out of the car. And it became a theme of throughout my career that if something is talked about, it seems to happen. I got into EMS when I was in high school. I mentioned I was a senior when I took my original EMT class. The local ambulance corps was across the street from my high school. So I was trying to ramp up my resume for college. So I joined the local ambulance corps, which had a youth corps, and a lot of people joined it. It seemed to be very popular. It had 40 people in it. Other ambulance corps didn't seem to have the youth corps that we had, but I guess because we were across from the high school. No one had to drive there. Also, if you join the ambulance corps, you got a parking space for high school because the parking was limited. So half of the people who joined just joined for the parking space. My paramedic instructor had this thing that he said that if you were in the crime scene photos, you were there too long. And he said this at the beginning of the program. Sometime near the end of it, I got my only cardiac arrest during the whole paramedic program, which is a year and a half. We got called to a Chelsea area on the 8th floor of a building. I was the last one out of the ambulance. I was with 2 paramedic instructors. They had me grab the trauma bag, what I thought was a trauma bag. I walked through the foyer, and there were like 20 cops standing around. And I walked into the bedroom, and the bedroom was filled with blood. The bed was covered in it. And there was a bloody knife on the floor. And then I walked into the bathroom, and there's a woman, a naked woman in her mid-60s on the floor. No stab wounds. No blood in the bathroom. No pulse. And I started CPR, and my 2 paramedic instructors, they started helping out. And it was my job to sort of run the call at this point. One paramedic instructor was getting the airway. I had my other paramedic instructor preparing medications. My job was to interpret the EKG and whether to shock the patient or not. I had to start the IV. And I'm about to start the IV when my paramedic instructor started yelling at me. I got the wrong bag. It wasn't the trauma bag. It was gas masks. So I was supposed to have like fluid in case to push fluid. I didn't have any. We had only one bag of fluid in the medication bag. So they were not happy with me. We ran in. We were running in. It was a mistake. I started the IV, and it was the first time I did it in such a stressful situation. I was nervous I wasn't going to get it. I managed to get it. And I pushed the medications for the first time. And it was obvious that this person was not going to make it. They were flatlining the entire time. And we were really mystified as to, we got called for a stabbing. There was a bloody knife, and there were no wounds on this person at all. So we were kind of mystified. After 20 minutes, we called for permission to end the CPR and stuff. And it's called calling medical control. Medical control decided to make us transport the patient. But before we could transport, the cops started taking the pictures. They wanted to get some pictures in before we left. So now I'm kind of realizing I'm in the crime scene photos. And I'm with the exact instructor who said this. So he's already angry at me because I got the wrong bag. And I'm thinking he's going to be angry at me because we're in the crime scene photos. We ended up transferring the patient to the hospital, and they called the patient dead at the hospital. About a year later, we found out what actually occurred. The patient's neck was broken. No matter what we did, it wasn't going to help. She passed before we got there. But it was, I guess, more important for me to go through all the steps and work the patient up. So that in case I have to do it for real, well, I did do it for real, but in case I actually had to do it on a viable patient, I could go through all the steps. I didn't respond in line 11. I had no connection to line 11. But once that happened, I kind of wanted to maintain my safety a bit. So I kind of headed for the door. I wanted something a little safer than that. And also, I was focused on other things in life. Since I was only a volunteer, I was focused on work. So since I wasn't working in EMS at the time, it was a volunteer position, I left. And I had started to do stand-up comedy. And around 2006, I was driving home from Manhattan when I witnessed a fairly serious car accident. A car slammed into another car that was stuck in traffic. They were doing like 90. And the two people in the car got ejected. And I ended up helping on that. I called 911, and the 911 dispatcher wanted to know if anyone was pinned in the vehicle. Like, no one's pinned. They were ejected. And I'm like, okay. And 30 seconds later, the police showed up because we were right next to the United Nations on the FDR. So we got a very quick response. And the police wanted to know if anyone was pinned in the vehicle. No. Again, they were ejected, laying on the street. And about 10 seconds after that, the fire department got there. And they wanted to know if anyone was stuck in the car. No, it's not a pin job. They got thrown out of the vehicle. So I helped load the 3 patients. There were 3 patients in total. 2 got ejected and 1 in the car that they hit. I helped load them into their ambulances. And when I got done, they tried to load me into an ambulance. Because they thought I was in the car accident. I literally had to fight them off me. They were ready to put a backboard on me and stuff. So I found that particularly interesting. And figured, hey, if I'm going to be there helping, I may as well get paid for it. So I went back into EMT class in 2007 and paramedic school in 2008. And I've been working in EMS ever since.